Hi, my name is Jack Palermo, and this is my story, Runaway Train. Chapter 1, Sneak Out. Damn you, John, I swear to God, get out of my house or I'll call the cops. My parents were too busy arguing. If they weren't arguing all the time, perhaps they would have caught me sneaking out the back door and down our street. My parents may have seen me sneaking out, but I'm just another stranger to them. In my class, kids are always talking about birthday parties, how old they are, and refer to each other by their given names. But not me. I don't know any of those things. I have never had a birthday party because my parents are always too busy. I don't know how old I am because no one has ever told me. And worst of all, I don't know what my name is because in our house, I'm either being yelled at and sworn at, or I'm being ignored like I don't even exist. After making sure no one was watching, I walked off our property and kept walking until night fell. I could hear all the night animals start to stir. It was time to find somewhere to sleep. I looked around and spotted a store about 500 meters away and decided I would go sleep there for the night. Morning came quick and it was time to wake up. I got up and fought against my hair to make it look halfway decent for the long day that was yet to come. Then I ate a little bit of bread I had stolen from the cupboard in our house. I began to walk, passing stores and families. After I had walked for several kilometers, I looked to my left and saw a forest in the distance. As soon as I saw it, I turned and headed in that direction. After walking for what seemed like hours, I was at the forest edge. I put my foot forward and let it sink into the mud beneath it. Suddenly, I was part of the wild. Chapter 2, Part of the Wild. I came across an old rotten bridge that had pieces of wood missing from the middle of it. It didn't look sturdy, but it was the only way to continue. I carefully placed one foot on the bridge. It creaked. I continued on, one foot in front of the other. After a minute or two, I was across the bridge. I turned to the right and knelt down beside the water's edge. I took out my water bottle that I always kept in my bag. Slowly, I dipped it under the water and let it fill up. I got back and onto my feet, then continued on, deep into the forest. I walked and walked until night fell again. I took a sheet out of my bag that I had taken off my bed back home. I spread the sheet over some branches in the hope that it would keep me dry if it rained overnight. Then I found some leaves that would make for a good mattress. I slowly laid down and put my head on my pack, which was my pillow for the night. After a while of twisting and turning, I finally fell asleep. After a long, deep sleep, I woke up to a pack of wolves very close by, looking for the food I had in my backpack. I took my bag and hid it behind an enormous tree that must have fallen during the night, right outside of my little setup. The wolves kept on looking, and after a while they found a piece of bread that I must have dropped when I dove behind the fallen tree. The wolves fought over the small piece of bread. After the bread was gone, all of them left the campsite. I got back up, took the sheet down, and scattered the leaves, so there was no evidence that I was ever here. After I was done cleaning up, I put everything in my bag and left for the day. I continued walking on the trail I had found, looking around for anything I could fill my water bottle with. I looked out to my left and saw something that looked like a dog. He started to come in my direction. I said, "Come here, boy, come here." He continued to walk in my direction. He was close now, definitely a dog. Chapter 3, A New Friend. What about I call you Cody? I let him sniff my hand to let him know that we would be my new friend. I continued along the trail, hopping logs and throwing sticks for Cody to fetch and bring back. I had to treat Cody like a brother now. We had to rely on each other. That was our only hope of surviving in the wild. We walked on. After walking for kilometers on end, we came across a stream. Cody took one glance at the stream and then bolted straight towards it. He dove headfirst into it and came back out with a large fish. It was almost night, so I looked around for 2 sticks that I could possibly make a fire with. After a minute or two, I found 2 dry sticks. Then I headed back to camp. Once I got back to camp, I started to rub the sticks together very fast. The sticks started to smoke. Then I saw little flames start to form. Quickly, I threw the sticks into a stack of wood that I had made in the fire pit. I put the fish on the end of the stick I had sharpened using a rock I found. The fish was finally done cooking, so I started to skin it and then cut it up. I ate a little bit of it. I would save the rest for tomorrow morning. The next morning, I ate a piece of fish and gave the rest to Cody. After we were both done eating our fish, we continued on the trail I had found. I had traveled several kilometers. When I stopped to listen, I heard cars driving on a road. Chapter 4: The Train. The sound was getting louder. I could see the road. All I had to do now was run down the hill to it. Cody and I sprinted down the hill and went into the first building we saw. I ran inside with Cody right behind me. The store I had run into was the train ticket store. I pulled out all the money I had and put it on the counter. I want to get as far away as here as I can. She took the money and replaced it with 2 tickets. I took the tickets off of the counter and boarded the first train we saw. Once we were on the train, Cody and I walked back and sat down in our seats. As I looked out the window, I knew my life was headed in the right direction. The end.
My name is Jack, and I'm going to be reading my story, The Kraken Attacks. One beautiful Sunday, my siblings and I board the Pearl of the Lakes cruise ship. We are going from Chicago to Toronto to meet our grandparents. The first thing we do when we board the ship is go to our cabin to call our grandparents and tell them that we got on the ship. After that, we went to explore the ship and found the water slides in the arcade. After looking around the gigantic ship some more, we decided to go have some food at the Garden Cafe. I had pasta with Alfredo sauce, and Sam and Clara had grilled cheese. So far, this adventure is turning out nicely. At 4:30, we feel the ship start to move, so we ran to the closest window to look at the glamorous city of Chicago as we set sail into Lake Michigan. For an hour, we sat by the window and took in the sights. After we were done looking out the window, Claire asked, "What do you guys want to do tonight?" I replied, "Let's watch the kids' comedy show in the Stardust Theater at 7 o'clock. We all agree that it's a good idea, and we go eat some dinner before the show. After the show, we went back to our cabin to get ready for bed. That night, we were woken up by a very loud banging noise, which eventually went away. When we woke up, we headed to the buffet to have some breakfast. During breakfast, the captain made an announcement and said that the banging noises were just some engineers working on the engine because the crews before us had a fire in the engine room. All the passengers were relieved to find out that there was an explanation for all that noise. The next few days went by very fast because we spent hours on the water slides and in the arcade. We went back to the cabin to take a break and watch TV when suddenly we heard the same banging noise as 3 nights earlier. This time it was much louder than the last time. After all the racket was done, we started to hear loud splashing noises. It sounded like it was coming from outside our window. So I ran over to the window and let out a huge scream. Ah! There was a huge squid waving around the ship's propellers in its tentacles. Sam called the captain and yelled, "There's a huge squid on the starboard side of our ship, and it's got our propellers." The captain tells the crew members to go search for the monster on the starboard side of the ship. When they get there, they do in fact find a giant squid-like monster attacking the ship. The crew and the captain can't believe what they are seeing. They saw a huge squid waving around its propellers and lifeboats in its tentacles. One of the crew members screams, "It's the Kraken!" Most of the crew ran away, but the brave ones stay and try to help us stop the Kraken from hurting anyone. The captain immediately set out a distress call to all nearby ships. The captain says we have a giant sea monster on the starboard side of our ship. We have lost our propellers and we need some assistance. Sam, Clara, and I run around the ship telling everyone to stay in their rooms so they don't get hurt. We run up to the restaurant to check for people, but there are dishes all over the floor and tables flipped over. All the people are hiding in the corner because they fear the tables might flip on them. We comforted them and tell them the captain has called the Coast Guard and everything is going to be all right. Clara ran back to the room and to call our grandparents and tell them what was happening. Our grandma and grandpa didn't believe anything Clara was saying. I had to go on the phone and tell them what was happening. And they must have believed me because they heard the fear in my voice. My grandma was freaking out because she asked if we were okay around 20 times. We told her, I will call you back later tonight when we have more details. We decided to go up to the top deck to get a good view of all the ships coming to help. Our ship has been drifting around Lake Erie for several hours before any help arrives. The first ship to arrive was the Coast Guard ship, which rammed into the Kraken at full speed, but the ship got damaged very badly. After that, a bunch of tugboats came and heard that we had no propellers, so they started pushing us to Toronto. As we were getting closer to shore, we saw so many ships and boats coming to help. They all ran into the Kraken and tried to scare him off, but the huge waves that the Kraken was making made it much harder for all the ships to catch him. Out of nowhere, a tiny ship flew into the Kraken, which made him slow down so the other ships could catch him. Finally, all the ships came together to push the Kraken out to deeper water. Nobody knew what happened to the Kraken after that, but the feisty monster was never seen again. As we started getting pushed back to shore, Sam says, "Who are all those people on the dock?" "I think they're reporters," said Clara. As we get closer, we start to hear all the people talking. "Look for Grandma and Grandpa," I said. Sam spots them waiting in front of all the reporters. When we arrived at shore, we run off the ship to our grandparents. They kept asking if we were okay. "Why don't we go out for dinner and you can tell us all about your wild journey," Grandma says. "That sounds like a great idea."
Hi, my name's Micah Houghton, and this year I entered the short story contest at the Norfolk County Public Library, and I wrote a story called The Extraterrestrial Mutants from Mars. The aliens came and did as they pleased, but couldn't escape, not from the fleas. Mike O'Connor, 14, was walking his dog, Milo. Milo was a 180-pound German Shepherd. Mike and his dog were walking to the local science fair at the library in Excito City. It was called Excito City because exciting things were always happening there. In Mike's free hand, he held his science project, a box of fleas. Mike had spent a whole day picking the fleas off Milo. Speaking of Milo, his dog seemed to be acting quite weird. Mike looked around. There were 3 people walking by. There was a man and a woman walking a poodle, and Mike's friend Jack. Mike had a weird feeling another exciting thing was about to happen. But hey, you don't call it Excito City for nothing. Now they were about a block away from the library. To their left, Fulman's Forest loomed in the dark, and to their right was Bull Track Boulevard, which was the cul-de-sac the library was on. Mike was about to cross the road when something caught his eye. There was a flash of light above Fulman's Forest. There it was again. Mike stood for a minute wondering what it was, when suddenly there was a horn blast. It lasted about 10 seconds and then stopped. It came from Fulman's Forest. Suddenly, a million gray flashes flew out from behind the trees. Mike stopped and stared in awe and wonder. He couldn't believe his eyes. The gray blurs stopped moving for a second, and Mike could see what they were. UFOs. They were about 50 feet in diameter, box-shaped, with massive engines on the sides. The heat waves were so powerful, Mike almost fell over. Milo howled in fright. Mike began to run with Milo at his heels. One of the spaceships detached from the fleet and headed toward Mike. Suddenly, all the spaceships veered off in different directions. Green beams sprung out of the bottom of the ships and began to suck up everything. Aliens suddenly dropped out of the ships and slid down poles. The aliens were ugly brutes, with 3 large eyes and huge arms. They all carried some sort of spear in their hands. An alien grabbed Mike and threw him into a green beam. Mike shot upwards at what seemed a mile a second. Mike was unaware that his dog was underneath him, coming at him an actual mile a second. Suddenly, all that 180-pound German Shepherd smashed into him. His box of fleas, which Mike had managed to hold onto this whole time, flew out of his hand and out of the beam. The box opened and spilled its contents all over the place. The fleas, box and all, began to fall. The fleas landed on the aliens, who seemed to be very scared of the fleas. They scattered and ran. Suddenly, all the beams stopped and everything began to fall. Luckily, there is an outdoor trampoline park and everyone landed on a trampoline. Everything was back to normal, but not for long. After all, this was Excito City.
Hi, my name is Sammy, and this is my Choose Your Own Adventure story, Tsunami at the Safari. One day at West Lynn, the principal chose 5 students to go on a field trip to a safari. Their names were Sammy, Miley, Liam, Nash, and Blake. The friends all got on a bus. Nash and Liam start singing a silly song. Sammy and Miley are yelling at them to stop. Meanwhile, Blake is driving the bus. "We are there," said Liam excitedly. The friends hopped out of the bus and ran to the check-in. They went through security and they were in. Miley and Sammy volunteered to do a presentation about how to take care of a cat. In fact, they had a real cat to show, and her name was Aggie. As Liam, Nash, and Blake sat down on the bleachers, Miley and Sammy were getting ready, but suddenly they heard a big rumble. "Kerplunk! It's a tsunami! Run!" exclaimed Miley. Continue reading if you want to ride a yacht, or go to the bottom of page 3 if you want to ride a safari car. Page 2. They jump on a yacht, but nobody knows how to drive it. Blake asked if he could try. First thing you know, they're buzzing past all the islands, but soon a problem occurs. The yacht starts slowing down like a snail on a sidewalk. Continue reading if you want to jump out. Go to page 6 if you want to stay on the yacht. Sammy yells, "Everyone out!" First, Blake, then Nash, Liam, Miley, and Sammy. She brings Aggie out on a life jacket, and they find an island to swim to. "Once we get there, we have to make an SOS sign right away," Nash told the friends. "We're there," screeched Blake. Continue reading to go hunting for food. Go to page 8 to make shelter. Page 3. "Let's go hunting for food," Nash told the others. They went through the woods with Sammy holding a berry basket and Liam holding a net. Meanwhile, Nash, Miley, and Blake were collecting wood for the bonfire. They fell asleep on the sand, and when they woke up, their principal was there. Hooray! End of part 1. If you chose to go in a safari car, here's your part. They hopped on a safari car and Nash explained, "I can handle this." He took the wheel and they were on their way. All of a sudden, Aggie jumped out. Now the chase had really begun. Continue reading to chase Aggie, or go to the top of page 5 to leave Aggie out. Page 4. "Quick, we have to get Aggie," screeched Sammy. They bolted down the road in the safari car attempting to capture Aggie. Meow. Aggie was quick as a bolt of lightning, but she wasn't usually this fast. "It was a dog!" "Step on it," yelled Liam. Everyone was determined to get Aggie back. "I have a solution," exclaimed Miley. "Nash and Liam, you jump right, and Sammy and I will jump left. On the count 3, everyone pounced at Aggie. To their surprise, the principal had jumped out of the bus and scooped Aggie up. They were all ready to head back to the school. End of part 7. If you were the person who chose to stay on the boat, here's your part. "What now?" asked Sammy. "We have to make an SOS. Blake, stay on the top and we will go downstairs to get food and put Aggie in the bedroom." It was only a minute before Blake came down and screamed, "A shark!" Sammy came up with an old can of tuna and threw it, and the shark swam after it. Continue reading to find a power-up. Go to page 7 to get on a helicopter. "Look, I found a humongous battery for the yacht." "It is giant," screeched Sammy, trying to hold it up. "I could use some help," cried Sammy tiredly. "Well, plug it in," yelled Miley dramatically. The yacht started moving, like my brother just ate a gazillion donuts. "Whoa, slow down," cried Nash and Liam. "Sorry," cried Blake as she pushed down on the slow down button. Continue reading if you want to find an island. Go to the bottom of page 6 to stay on. "Look, an island," cried Blake excitedly. Well, step on it, yelled Sammy and Miley. Jinx, jinx again, screeched Sammy and Miley. Stop, cried Liam. That is annoying. Geez, why is Liam such a spaz sometimes? Whispered Sammy and Miley to each other. Ha ha, giggled Miley and Sammy. When they got to the island, their principal was waiting. Hooray, cried all the friends. End of part 3. If you were the person who wanted to stay on the yacht, here's your part. Let's stay on the yacht, exclaimed Miley. I hope our principal comes, cried Nash. All of the friends were nervous, but then their principal showed up on a safety boat. Yay, cried the friends. End of part 2. If you were the person who wanted to use a helicopter, here's your part. Look, it's a helicopter, screeched Blake, and he was right. The propellers were spinning fast as a cheetah. Yay, screamed the friends, except for one problem. Not everyone could fit. Continue reading to use Sammy's rope. Go to the bottom of page 8 to stay on the yacht again. Guys, I have a rope, screamed Sammy as Liam, Nash, Blake, and Miley stared at her surprise. What? You never know when a rope will come saving an emergency. They all laughed. Before you know it, they were all back at West Lynn. Hooray! The end of part 4. If you were the person who decided to make shelter at the island, here's your part. We have to build shelter, screeched Miley. They went searching for rocks and wood. Then they went back to the beach and got working. Ta-da! Yelled Sammy excitedly. They all hopped in, fell asleep, and when they woke up, their principal was awaiting in his $15 million floating home. End of part 5. And if you want to stay on the yacht again, here's your part. Let's all stay on, yelled Liam over the crashing waves that were thumping like an elephant. It's the principal, screamed everyone. He had just arrived in his speedboat. They all got back to West Lynn and shared their amazing story with all their friends. End of part 6. The end.